This episode of RadCast Outdoors is brought to you by PK Lures, Bow Spider, and High Mountain Seasonings.
Fish on! Hey, RadCast is on.
Hunting, fishing, and everything in between. This is RadCast Outdoors. Here are David Merrill and Patrick Edwards.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of RadCast Outdoors. I know it's been a bit, and I apologize. It's been kind of nutty for both David and myself, so I apologize for the long break, but we are back. We're going to jump into a new episode, and I've got David here with me. He's kind of half alive, but he's here. How you doing, David?
I am glad to be among the land of the living. For the listeners out there that don't know, I spent the last 20 days in a bed with the lovely COVID-19, but I'm back. I don't want to talk about it much other than, yes, I got it, and I spent 2 weeks of my life in a bed.
Yeah, and so we're excited to have David back and up and running again. You know, we've both had our issues the last month, whether it's COVID for you, shoulder for me. It is what it is, but we're back in the studio. So again, welcome everybody. I just wanted to say a big shout out to our audience. Just thank you all very much for following and sharing and subscribing and being a part of the podcast. I think we're somewhere around 7,000 downloads, something like that, for all of our episodes. So that's great. And we really appreciate it. We
couldn't do it without you guys.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
keep it up.
This is what keeps us rolling, is knowing that people are out there waiting. Just a big shout out to all of you. And so thank you so much.
This marks almost a full year. No, this will be the start of year 2 of the
this
podcast.
Is like second year, because we started. It'll be two.
Yeah, we started in 19.
November of 19, so it'll be 2 years here in November.
Well, I'm just tickled to still be here, still rocking and rolling, loving it.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and we get to cover whatever we want, which I think is part of the appeal for David and I. We get to cover whatever we want to do. So, all right, so today we thought we'd just do a little bit of our own perspective on one of our favorite animals. What is it, David?
Ursus arctos horribus.
You're doing better than me. I could never come up with that and say the scientific name.
That is the scientific name for my least favorite. What would you call it? Large carnivore.
At least favorite, as far as that's the one you don't want to run into, right?
Yes, that is the scientific name for the grizzly bear.
Yeah. David and I know a little bit about grizzly bears from experience out in the field, or just, you know, our friends who've had experiences out in the field.
Brown bear, grizz, horribus is what I like the name.
Horribus is in horrible if you run into one.
Yes.
I put up a post this past week on social media talking about that, you know, with Dan Thompson. You know, he said the things that they actively defend, you know, their food, their space, and their young, of course.
And by actively, you're talking 200-300 yards. And, you know, every time I've been charged, Patrick, my focus has been either north or east or west, and they come from like beside and behind you. So you're literally looking north. Oh, everything's good. And all of a sudden you hear a little bit something to the southeast, and you just turn over your shoulder and look, and here come the bushes are exploding, and here comes a horribus.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is, a lot of times you don't even know that they're around. They're just ticked off. You're in their space somehow.
You know, Ranella calls them charismatic megafauna. Mm-hmm. And I like that name too as well, you know, because yes, they are very charismatic and they are mega. But
massive.
I just, you know, I get it. I shared a article on the Facebook page group we have. If you guys haven't known about that or heard about it, you're more than welcome. Just ask for an invite, and Patrick and I'll join you in the group. We try and keep it lighthearted and friendly and be nice to everyone. So it's been a cool group so far, but I shared that article that, you know, they're relocating yet another bear to Togety, Yellowstone, you know, Du Bois, Union Pass. That's where they just go collect these bears that are getting into trouble and drop them off. And I mean, to give Dan a shout out, I know they're doing the best they can, but, you know, my opinion, Patrick, if we've got that bear collared and in a cage, I mean, I'm all for euthanization because we have plenty of bears.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's some parameters that if a bear meets, yeah, they're going to euthanize him. If it's acting aggressive, if it's, you know, raiding homes, you know, hey, boo-boo, let's get another picnic basket. But my thought is, and this is just me being a little bit, obtuse probably, but California has a grizzly bear on their state flag. California has 0 grizzly bears in their state. So I think they have one or two options. Number one is they can start taking these excess grizzly bears that we have done all the work, and we'll trade for, I don't know, we'll trade turkeys for grizzly bears. I think that's a wonderful trade. But we want 10 turkeys for every grizzly bear. Or they need to take that grizzly bear off their state flag.
Well, I think that you bring up a good point, because I've been saying this for years, is that we need to start exporting bears. Since there's so many states that love them so much, I think that, you know, it's just only fair that we export some of our bears. And heck, I don't even want anything in return. I mean, they can take 10, 15 grizzly bears here and there, you know, and put them back on their native range. You know, I'm totally fine with that. But I think that one of the things that's been interesting about it is the people that live in those states, they're perfectly happy with us having them and not having to deal with them themselves, just like with the wolves too. I mean, it's a similar deal, but it's like
it's the not in my backyard mentality.
Yeah, but my opinion, heck yeah, we can easily. We're way over our numbers for the ESA.
Oh yeah, way over.
So why don't we start
Dan Thompson
exporting?
already said that, you know, they're being conservative as far as they're not overestimating that population. They're being minimally conservative, and they said something like 800 bears.
Over 800, yeah.
That was last year. And they're slated to add, you know, 10% to their population. No natural predators. We're not taking any out of the population to speak of, really. So,
well, I mean, if you go with the argument that they use, their argument is, well, we need grizzly bears there because that's their native home range. Well, last time I checked, there used to be grizzly bears on the West Coast, right? So
yeah.
Why can't they go back again? You know, it's the whole argument that got us the wolves.
Oh, it's the 5 million people in Portland that wouldn't put up with having a grizzly bear walking through their neighborhood and eating Fido.
Mm.
But it's okay for you and I to have to, you know, deal with these things. I don't know how to solve it other than, you know, just to get people aware that if we don't, I mean, I've talked to a couple guides in Alaska, right? And for everybody listening, the GYE is saturated with bears, and GYE is the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. But BC, Canada, you know, you get up into the northern half of Montana, that's no longer the GYE. There's plenty of grizzly bears up there, and all the way up through Alaska, there's plenty of diversity in that population. And like Dan said, you know, yes, you can have local extirpation, but they are not endangered. They're not even close to being endangered. The way they're actually endangered right now, they're in danger of running out of food because there's so many of them.
And there's infanticide. I mean, the big males are killing the young.
Oh, of course.
Because why would you want to have, you know, competition in your home area?
Well, more importantly is, you know, a sow comes into heat every 2 or 3 years. She rears those cubs till they're almost 3 years old. If that boar can come in and annihilate those cubs, she's going to come back into heat the next year. So he gets to further his genome down the line instead of somebody else's. So that's, I mean, yeah, it's brutal. It's cruel. We'll have to ask. I don't know if they feed on the cubs very much.
Sometimes.
I
know they do in Alaska.
They'll feed on wolves. They'll feed on anything else. So I would imagine they do. But do you know why they call them brown bears?
Why is that?
Because there's a brown streak in your shorts after you meet one.
Yeah, no kidding. That's no joke right there. I mean, that's a bear you don't want to run into. But I do think that there is kind of we're on that tipping point, I guess you could say, of irresponsible management. We've been there for a while, right? Because you have such an excess population of this super predator that now you have ultra competition, not just between grizzly bears, wolves, mountain lions, all those things, black bears, but also between them themselves. Like I said, you've got poor grizzlies going out killing young, it could be avoided or at least mitigated to a point. Like, you're not ever going to avoid all of it, but you could get some of them out of here.
And to play devil's advocate, I don't want all the bears removed. I'm not on the bandwagon of saying, hey, we need to have 0 bears like they did in the 50s. No, you know
We
what?
just have too many.
They are a cool critter. And to get to see one out of your vehicle, out of Yellowstone, at 300 yards walking on the other ridge is intimidating. Seeing one at 30 yards snapping its teeth and running at you is it's more than intimidating.
Or woofing at you.
You know, most of the listeners probably know that I lived in Alaska, hunted in Alaska, did a lot of solo camping in Alaska, and never was overly concerned. And I've talked to a couple guides up there and told them about these bears down here, and they said, that sounds horrible. Because when they stand up and yell at a grizzly in Alaska, I mean, the brown coastal bears, and they are a little bit different subspecies, are significantly larger. But the way you can tell kind of a difference is fish-eating bear, a salmon-eating bear, kind of coastal Alaska and British Columbia versus an inland interior British Columbia or Alaska. You know, those interior bears focus more on berries and ungulates, deer, elk, antelope, caribou, whatever is available to them. So the size difference, you're talking an inland, a big boar is going to be in that 500 pounds. You're going to get out like on Kodiak, which again is more, that's exclusively brown bears. You're going to be well over 1,000 pounds, upwards of 1,300 pounds. But those fish-eating bears, because they have such a caloric-rich intake of fish, are not nearly as aggressive. They have a much smaller personal, circle of safety and zone where, and we're talking, I'll give people the Russian River. Flows into the Kenai. If you want to go see a brown bear, go hike the Russian River Trail when the salmon are in, and you'll see a brown bear. Especially morning, evening. And I've got some pictures, and we'll put one up of a sow with 2 cubs, and she was walking towards me. I was standing there fishing. I just said, "Hey, bear." She crossed the Russian River, went past me, and hiked up, and then crossed back when she got about 200 yards above me. Her cubs just followed. She just kind of swaying her head. She looked up at me for a second and went back to, oh, no big deal, fishermen. But there is thousands and thousands of fishermen that, kind of habituate those bears to what's going to be tolerated and what's not. And like what I wanted to get to is those interior bears talking with those guides. When those guys yell at an interior grizzly, a 500-pound grizzly, max, that bear hits the ground and runs away. Why? Because they're hunted, and they have a very deep respect for man, And I have a respect for the bears. I try and give them their space. But these dang bears here, Patrick, when you yell at them, they run at you every time. And their little personal zone isn't 30 to 50 yards like it is on the Kenai. No. It's 300 to 500 yards.
Yeah, I've had friends that have been 300 or 400 yards downhill of a sow with cubs, and she came tearing down at them. They were riding their horses down in the bottom of a gully, going through. And yeah, the interior, I guess what you could say, grizzly bear of Wyoming, the only grizzly bears that we have here are way more aggressive. And I think you bring up a good point. A lot of it has to do with they're not hunted. They have no fear of man. Their experience with man is, here in Wyoming anyway, is I hear a gunshot, that's probably something getting killed that I can go eat.
They have definitely been habituated to learning that. And they've associated with firearm reports.
It's called the dinner
food.
bell.
Yeah. So you're ringing the dinner bell and they're coming running. And there's some truth to that. These bears, especially the Union Pass, Togety, Grovant bears.
Dunor.
80% of their diet is ungulate. They are eating elk. That's what they eat.
And they can chase them down too. Have you seen those videos, like them chasing down like a calf elk?
Oh yeah, there was a study in I think it was Yukon territories, and we'll have to pull it up. But they collared an adult male grizzly and followed him around, and actually verified scientific study. And he ate something like 52 calf moose in like 2 or 3 weeks, because all those ungulates time their breeding cycle together. They kind of breed the same week or two. That's called the rut. It's us archery hunters love to hunt that period of time, but nature has done that so that they drop all those calves the same week or two. So the calves kind of have a herd mentality protection. If all those cow elks disperse from the herds and they go out by themselves and they drop a calf. And, you think about it, if that herd stayed together in maybe 500 head or 200 head or 50 head, but on Friday, all 50 of them drop their calves, grizzly bear's just got to get in the middle of them and he can eat half a dozen of them, right? But if they all spread out 200, 300, 500, 1,000 yards, now that bear's got to do a lot more wandering, and those calves have a chance to survive.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. You brought up just the predation. I'm looking at it. You've got here in Wyoming up until 1995, right? We had a low population of grizzly bears. We didn't have wolves until they were introduced. In our elk populations.
There's some debate about that. And, the one thing, I'm not to dispel you or interrupt you, Patrick, but, there's a couple wolves that have been collared that have left packs in Oregon and left packs here in Wyoming and have gone all the way down to Utah or Southern California, turned around and gone back. So to say that there was no wolves in the Yellowstone Park,
publicly there were no wolves, right?
I would say 99.9% of the wolves were gone. And if there was a wolf in there, he might have been one of those bachelor younger adolescent males that was just roaming around. But
sure, but what I'm saying is the predator population was nothing like it is now.
Oh yeah,
I mean the landscape has changed for sure. And
have you seen that video called Tropic Cascades, how wolves affected?
I've heard a lot about it, but I haven't watched it. So
I mean, without getting too deep into it, a tropic cascade basically means that a charismatic mega fauna carnivore will affect the ecosystem all the way down to the insect level and help heal the environment. And there has been the study that was done in Banff, Canada, actually had some reputable scientific data and evidence, and they actually went out and proved that it can happen. But that film and the way they talk about Yellowstone it's more than up for debate. It's pseudoscience.
Yeah, I've heard about that. They say they brought back all these things, but I don't know that I necessarily buy that. So
for our listeners, I mean, I don't want to perpetuate even the viewing that film. Don't go view it. It really is garbage. It's had like 500 million views already, and and if you can get mad at me, but I have a different opinion. Basically what it said is because the wolves came back, they started putting pressure on the ungulates, so the ungulates didn't feed as close to the river as often. Right, they dispersed their feeding patterns more, and so because their feeding patterns were dispersed more, the willows grew bigger. Because the willows grew bigger, more beaver moved back in, and the beavers could build dams and slow the erosion, and so that led to more insects, which led to a healthier environment. And yes, all these things are true to a point. Having beaver dams is a good thing, right? Controlling erosion is a good thing, but we as humankind, by not letting fires burn, by not removing the beetle kill, we're causing more environmental destruction than a wolf chasing an elk off a stream will ever.
Yeah. Well, and, if that's their point and maybe that's what they feel is the truth, well, then why not get wolves in Washington, Oregon, California, all these other places? I mean, that's been my argument this whole time is you want Wyoming to bear the burden of this. Cause if you're a cattle rancher, you are bearing the burden. If you have cows up there, they are getting predated on. That's just the world that they live in. And
to go through some of those numbers, I know one of the cattle ranchers here, let's say they have 300 head that they run up, pairs. So 150 mom and babies. And they run them up on a grazing allotment of 10,000 acres on the forest. So they have from April till October or whatever, they have a permit. They're allowed to be there, remove so much of that feed, and then they have to come off. Well, some of those guys are losing 20 calves, plus maybe even 30 calves to wolves and grizzly bears. You start looking at, those guys are going to maybe make 200,000-300,000, but they have 200,000+ in expenses. So if you're looking at a 25-30% of your profits is feeding is feeding grizzly bears and wolves, I mean, do you want a pay cut like that?
No.
And the other side will say, well, though they don't need to, those cattle ranchers don't need to be as rich and as wealthy and have as much land. And I mean, I'm sorry, but I roll my eyes. We all like to go to McDonald's and have a cheeseburger. Where's that cow come from?
Most cattle ranchers I know aren't rolling in dough either.
They're not driving brand new pickups and living and taking month vacations around the world. Those guys,
they work hard.
They work way too hard to keep those cows alive. And we had a little tiny herd on this place, and between them getting out and having to take care of them and everything else, that's a hard job.
It is. And speaking of hamburgers, we need to talk about one of our sponsors. So.
I'm guessing. Let me guess. High Mountain Seasoning.
That's right. High Mountain Seasonings has everything you need. Next time you want to go grill up some burgers, grill some steaks, maybe you've got some venison backstrap that you need to eat, go to highmountainjerky.com or HIMTNjerky.com. They've got everything that you need. And coming up here shortly, David, is hunting season. So you're going to need their jerky kits too.
Yeah, jerky, summer sausage, breakfast sausage, backstrap. Yeah, the list goes on and on and on.
Yeah, it's good stuff. So go help them out. Spread the word.
I like the whole muscle jerky, and they have a really good kit. And you just take a big chunk of meat, slice it thin, brine it, and then smoke it. And it's good, but the kids really love that ground jerky. You get the jerky gun, shoot it on some wax paper, stick it in the oven. You make after you grind it, you put in the seasonings. They've got the proportions on the packaging. You just have to weigh it, grind it, put it in the gun, shoot it, and stay. And those kids will eat pounds of that stuff. I can't make it fast enough.
It's so good. Yeah, so definitely get out there and do that. Getting back to the bears, the thing that's been kind of interesting, I don't know if you've noticed this, but over the last 10 years especially, is the litigation. I mean, we've had the back and forth between state of Wyoming, state of Montana, state of Idaho, and the federal government, and federal judges injunctioning here and doing this and that there. The part that really gets me is it's like this moving the goalposts with the law.
And it's not scientifically based.
Right.
I can get on board 100% with any ESA, proposal, Endangered Species Act, saying, hey, we need to protect the golden spotted frog from this construction site, or we need to protect, the California condor from toxic lead shot. If you can scientifically prove that, hey, this bird's eating whatever, getting enough lead to actually be killing its young, killing its offspring, reducing its birth rate, and killing itself, if you can go out and prove that scientifically, there's no question that this is what's going on, then heck yeah, I'll get on board with, hey, let's put in some procedures, some rules, and protect it. But when it's, like you said, especially with these bears, I get a little heated. We're just going to move the goalpost. Oh, we're just going to move the goalpost. And everybody knows that. And if you don't really look at it, and I don't have the data here, and we're not going to get into wolves, but wolves is one that they started with, they said if there was 100 wolves and 10 breeding pairs, so 10 packs, that they would be recovered. That was the agreement. That's what the scientists said was a healthy population. We're now at 50 packs and 800 wolves, and it's still, we're going to move the goalpost, and there's not enough, and they're still threatened. And it's like, no. And here's what we all need to take a step back and look at. We should be applauding that the ESA worked, that the wolves are recovered, and that we can now hunt them. That should be held up as human beings brought wolves back from the brink. Human beings brought whitetails back. We brought bison back. That shouldn't be held it up and touted that, it's not good enough, so now we got to double that, because there has to be a balance, Patrick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you bring up a good point, is that unfortunately there are special interest groups that don't believe in the science of it, and they don't really care what the carrying capacities are for that area. It's a totally
I wonder if
selfish,
they even know what carrying capacity.
Well, it's a totally selfish motive.
Oh yeah, I think my 2 cents, in my opinion, is they want to get hunting banned completely.
Exactly. It's all about getting rid of hunting. Mm-hmm. It has nothing to do with the good of the species or any of that. It has more to do with, well, we just don't want you to hunt them.
I've heard them say stuff like they'd rather the government agency remove 99 of the 100 bears than have one bear be removed by a hunter. And it comes down to an emotional thing for them. It's no longer science. And you can't manage a ranch, manage a farm, manage an ecosystem, manage a fishery on emotion.
Nope.
Okay. I mean, and we can go on a little tangent. I really think the Kenai River today should be closed for king salmon fishing. They voted, the guides said, well, we're going to be out of work. We want to catch king salmon. The returns are lower and lower and lower, and that's a 5 to 7 year fish. Most salmon are a 3 to 5 year. And those Kenai River kings, Les Anderson caught that 98-pound, but he toted it around for 4 hours before they even weighed it. So it was likely a 103, 104-pound fish. You're lucky to go catch a 50-pound fish out of that river now. They're 50% smaller fish. And the numbers just year after year after year. And yeah, I know I'm putting Alaska fishing game on blast, but sitting down here 3,000 miles away, watching them go, well, we'll just open and take a few more. Somebody needs to tag a few of those fish and figure out why, because that's a glacial fed stream. And there's no dams. There's really not a whole lot of human. I mean, you can't even step on the bank, Patrick. I know. They've done a pretty good job on the river portion to manage that. Well, there's something else going on. I mean, and we can speculate, but I think we need to get some scientists out there. And one thing we can do right now today, I mean, it seems short-sighted to me. It seems like they're cutting their nose off to spite their face by saying, well, we'll just open fishing again this year. Okay, that's great this year, but 10 years from now when you have zero fish, you're not going to have anybody paying thousands of dollars to fly up there to maybe see a fish in a week. I mean, let's be honest. Yeah, it's kind of fun to catch those salmon, but that is a meat fishery. And people go up there to come home with a fish box full of salmon.
Well, and I think another thing that, especially with like a fishery like that, I think you bring up a good point. That there is something going on up there, for sure. You know, you talked about the numbers being down, the size being down. There's a lot of factors at play. I think you've got the ocean part of their life is a huge part of it. They're pressured a lot harder in international waters, especially.
I think sonar has gotten better to where they target those bigger fish.
Absolutely.
And I'm not going to sit here and speculate that this is
the reason. It's a combination of things, and it's complex. Yeah, it's got to be figured out because in 10 years we may not have them. I mean, if it keeps going the way it is. I was up there 7 years ago, and it was bad.
Oh yeah, the whole time I lived there, it was never open for keep. There was 1 year it opened for catch and release when they thought they were going to have good numbers, and then they turned around and shut that down. A couple years after we moved back down here to the lesser 48, we got to go back one summer, and my dad's now a resident, and so we go up and visit him. And we got to kill a few kings, and it was fun, and we ate them, and some of those bigger fish need to be let go. And I can get on board with the catch and release. I mean, a whole bunch of people, there's an argument there, but if you handle a fish properly, you think, oh, wear it out. They've done a study, and the mortality rate, as long as you don't, hook them super deep, and you don't really abuse the fish. I mean, you just quickly land it, don't pull it out of the water, take your photo, unhook the thing, and make sure it's revived when you release it. I think there was something like 96% of those fish make it to spawning. Yeah,
I've talked to a lot of fish biologists about this. I think there's a lot of factors. One is temperature. If the temperature is up, especially with a cold water species, you're going to kill it. The other thing is where it's hooked, the slime on their body. You don't want to remove a bunch of their slime. That'll kill them. And then just general handling of the fish. If you're grabbing them improperly, you're going to kill them. And, duration of being out of the water is a huge factor. But, yeah, I know we're off on a tangent. We're talking grizzly bears. But really, that does sustain a bear population in Alaska. And, we got to have those fish. We absolutely have to figure that out.
And that's those special interest groups. I'm glad people are passionate. I'm glad people are out there wanting to improve.
we're special interest, right?
Oh, yeah,
We're
heck yeah.
hunters and fishers. I mean, we're not going to pull any jabs here. I mean, we are special interest.
My interest is I want to put protein in the freezer.
Yep.
And sometimes I'm fine with catch and release. I'm fine with, if I go out deer hunting anymore, Patrick, I'm not shooting a spike fork buck. I'd rather go harvest a doe if we're going to, then the biologists say that we need to reduce this local herd. I'm fine with that. But if I don't want to go catch 12-inch rainbow, I want to go catch 24-inch rainbow, right? I don't want to go shoot spike forks. I want to go shoot 4 points. And I actually want to go harvest a grizzly bear, and one day I will get it done. And, if you don't like me for that, that's okay. That's your opinion. But don't sit there and say that I'm wrong in doing that, right? When, if you look at the science of it, and that's kind of what I wanted to cover here is you go look at the science of the North American conservation model around the world, it works. Where it's not implemented, I mean, game population numbers are absolutely plummeting to zero. Their Amazon rainforest is getting bulldozed and turned into crop fields, and the farmer walks around and anything that's disturbing his crops gets shot and gets put in a pot. That's just the way the world works. You look at cornfields back east, whitetails obliterate those cornfields, but there's subsidies to pay that farmer. There's game wardens to patrol to make sure that farmer just isn't piling 50 deer on the corner of his field every week. And there's some of those Missouri, Iowa, Kansas states that you could shoot 50 whitetails, especially if you were out there with the spotlight on your cornfields. And, think of the antelope here on the alfalfa fields.
Oh, yeah.
So there's science that helps manage all of this, and there's biologists and state representatives that have been hired to do the best they can. I mean, Dan Thompson, my hat's off to him. Kudos. He's got a dang tough job because he's got the farmers and ranchers and the hunters saying, remove every one of these bears and screaming at him. And then he's got people on the other side of the aisle saying, you better not touch a hair on one of those bears' heads. They're our sacred cow. And the truth really is somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I don't think that we need to obliterate every animal. It's like we can't just go wipe out all the grizzly bears. I don't think that's a good thing. But we also don't need 2 to 3 times the population. That's the carrying capacity either.
There's a couple drainages, Patrick, up there where I like to go wander around that have a bear per square mile density that is the highest bear density in North America, excluding a couple salmon streams in Alaska in August. The rest of the year, Alaska has a lower bear density. You're talking 1 bear per 10, maybe 20 miles, where we still almost annually, and some of those drainages are running a bear per square mile. So on a 5-6 mile hike, you're going past half a dozen bears. That's ridiculous.
Well, there's some places that you and I've hiked like that, I mean, we're glad we didn't run into any, right? Go hiking in to go fishing. But I mean, I'm sure those willows are tall. I'm sure we walked by a ton of bears.
And,
what was it last year? We walked by, turn around, and there's this big old black bear that was there that
100 yards away. We never saw
it was there.
And the willows were chest, maybe head high in some spots, but chest high. And yeah, he did his thing. We did our thing. I have a healthy respect, but I'm not terrified of bears. It's not a Jaws situation where, we need to kill every dang shark I've ever seen. And I do feel that way about those demon fish. But I just stay out of the water. They stay in the water. We're good.
There you go.
So back to the grizzly bears, though, I want to see the scientific management of them.
Yep. Well, and I want to see the state agency be able to do their job. I think there's, not that the federal agencies are bad, but the Wyoming Game and Fish Department should be able to sell tags, should be able to help manage the population. There's absolutely no reason that they're kind of on the fringe of it. I mean, they get to deal with some of the heartache of it, unfortunately.
And we can look at it economically right now. A non-resident elk tag, the special is $1,200, and a good portion of those people are hiring a guide at $5,000. So you got $6,200 coming to the state for every bull elk that gets harvested. How many dollars come to the state for every grizzly bear?
Yeah.
0.
Exactly. Nothing.
We actually spend money relocating, trapping, mitigating. So, and like it or not, sportsmen are feeding those grizzly bears. And you can argue with me all you want, but there was no elk left. There was no bison left. There was no whitetail left. And there was no grizzly bears and wolves left. It's the sportsmen that, with the Pittman-Robertson Act, said, you know what, we need to fund conservation. We need to stop this. We don't want to see this go the way of the passenger pigeon. And if you don't know that story, go do a little Google research on the passenger pigeon. I mean, and the attitude in the turn of the 1800s, turn of the century was, it's an unending consumable resource. Just take, and we overtook, right? So I don't want anybody out there listening to this thinking I'm advocating for annihilating and completely removing the grizzly bear. What I'm advocating for is letting our state agencies and letting our sportsmen manage the resource responsibly.
Well, and you think about it this way too. And I know some people, this won't matter what I'm about to say, but I'm okay with that. I'm just going to say it. But if we are managing the bears, we're going to have a lot less of these encounters where people are losing their lives. And I mean, we had that guy get killed up by Turpin Meadows a couple of years ago. We had that young lady in Montana. Well, we had a young lady in Montana get killed just recently.
Yeah, she got pulled out of her tent in the middle of the night.
In the middle of the night.
We had another guy get killed in West Yellowstone this year. I mean, it's not, we're not sitting here crying wolf and saying that this is just our pet peeve. This is a legitimate concern and problem for any sportsman, nature hiker, bird watcher, fly fisherman.
At this point,
weekend camper. It doesn't matter who you are. If you're within these bears' habitat, and I go back to those guides I talked to in Alaska, when they're remote guiding a client and they run into a bear and they stand up and yell, "Hey bear," that bear beach cheeks, just getting out of Dodge, and they'll run miles to get away from a human. These bears, you stand up and say, "Hey bear," you got a fight or flight on your hand. And so one thing I do, and we've done, and when we've gone hiking, I pack 2 cans of bear spray and a pistol. I've upgraded from a 45 ACP with hardcast bullets to a 10 mm. Now there's an argument for either weapon. I've been charged enough times to tell you that unless you are a seasoned expert marksman, that you're not going to even pull that pistol out of your holster by the time the bear is going to be on top of you. So if you want to stay safe, the buddy system, and everybody has a can of bear spray. Bear spray is very effective until it runs out. And that's why, I pack both and I believe in both. And thankfully, knock on some wood, it hasn't, escalated to the point of either a human or a bear's lost its life. But there's been a couple of those encounters that, the thing for me was the 2 encounters that I had that were the closest. One was a sow with a cub at about 60 yards, and one was a very large adult boar at about 30 yards. And the boar came from 90 to 30 in a blink of an eye. Mm-hmm. I didn't even get my hands off my hiking poles. He got up to about 30, established that he was dominant, and turned around and went back on. And we had just gotten too close to one of his carcasses and kills. It was a deer kill, still had hair on it. So I'm fairly certain that, he had actually either found a deer that had been wounded or he harvested that. It wasn't a carcass that he'd taken from humankind, right? So that's fine. It's his. We gave him his space and got out of there. But he was an adult 550-pound male grizzly, and he knew without a doubt that if he wanted to eat my lunch, he could have it. And he just was warning me that I was too close to his stuff. That sow and female cub, we were out in the middle of a meadow hiking on the pack trail at about 10 in the morning. We come through this island of trees. There's a big meadow with a little island of timber in the middle, and the island of timber was 120 yards. And we come out of the timber, there's a dog leg in the trail, and they're out 100 yards in the middle of the meadow from all directions from timber. And I just said, "Hey bear," and she kind of stood up for a second, and the wind was in my favor, so the wind was blowing from the bear to me. So she couldn't smell me, right? But we had hiked up that trail in the dark 3 hours earlier. So there's human scent on that pack trail. And she went down on all fours, turned 90 degrees. Her cub followed her, and I could hear her breaking branches and trees for 200 or 300 yards to get away from me, which was the right choice for her because it wouldn't have ended well. You know, when I had seen her coming walking at 60 yards, I had already had time to draw my pistol. So
got ready.
I was ready for it. But it still, when she stood up and looked at me, I was like, okay, what's going to happen now? Because I'm holding my ground. I mean, I've yelled, hey, bear. And so I'm not going to lie, Patrick. Neither time did I feel overly confident that I was going to come out on top in those situations.
Yeah. And you don't know because you don't know what your body's going to do. You don't know if your spray is going to malfunction, your gun's going to malfunction. That's one of those situations. I mean, you try to be prepared, but you don't know what you're going to do in that situation at all.
And so, I mean, the fatalities that we have had have been single people, right? Excluding
Most
Mark.
of the time.
Most of the time. And, you know, Mark, he rode in horseback, did everything you're supposed to do, and it still didn't matter. So I'm of the camp and of opinion that we need to teach these bears a little respect.
Well, and we're so far above the carrying capacity, we're just asking for it to continue to happen. And we want to mitigate hikers being torn up, hunters being torn up, fishermen being torn up. I mean, no one wants to see someone lose their life. No one wants that bear to lose its life either. So I want to make that clear. Like, nobody needs to in these situations, right? Like, we want to make it so that these conflicts are a lot less, and there's a lot less fatalities on both sides of this.
Oh, yeah. Oh, certainly. And I mean, you could use the example of having a barn cat around your farm. I mean, I grew up, you always have a barn cat, right? You either have rats or cats. But the crazy cat lady that has 52 cats at her house and she owns an acre and she's just barely feeding them, and those cats are going everywhere, getting into everybody's garbage, killing every songbird and every snake that they can find, right? Not spaying and neutering them, not being responsible. That's basically where we're at with these grizzly bears.
So we're the crazy bear people?
Well, I'm not, but I mean, we as the United States of America, I mean, are.
Yeah,
we really
true.
are. And they're unfortunately, they're not worth the effort. Now, you got to take that with a grain of salt. I still want to hear wolves. I still want to go out and chase mountain lions. One of these days, I want to get a Wyoming grizzly. I think that'd be amazing. But we need to see where their carrying capacity's at and keep them in check and not have emotion about it. That's all I'm trying to advocate for.
I mean, we do the same thing with elk. There's a huge herd of elk just outside of Cheyenne, Wyoming, the capital city. And I mean, they do a drive to try to get these elk, managed. Why? Well, because there's not enough feed for all those said elk. So it's the same kind of thing. I mean, that's all we're saying is that they need to be managed, and managed to the science, not just managed to the way, people that don't even live here feel like.
Oh, and as a sportsman, as a special interest group, sometimes, I mean, I can bring up an example where, those big elk herds over there where the large carnivore guild is not intact, right? You're talking about the Bighorns or Saratoga or wherever. Those elk, once they get a little pressure, they figure out to go on some of those bigger 2,000-3,000 acre ranches. And the ranchers are, have an absolute moratorium on shooting elk. They want to sell big bull tags for $15,000, $20,000. And yeah, you can come shoot one big bull. Well, the problem with that is that is actually harming that elk herd. They're overgrazing everything else around them. And it may not be harming the elk herd, right? Because they're a little more aggressive. But the mule deer are the ones that are being displaced. And our mule deer out west, if anybody knows anything, they're hurting really bad.
Bad deal. I mean, it's all about balance. And right now, because of things like that and the things with the grizzly bears and wolves, we don't have the balance we need.
So there's one awesome tool that can be implemented. And the state agency, again, give kudos to Wyoming. They do flying counts. They really do try and manage. And could they do better in certain areas through the lens of certain interest groups? Yeah, but as a whole, I've lived in other states that haven't done nearly as good of a scientific-based responsible management. But you get down to it, and we need to, and one of the tools that I wanted to talk about was Wyoming Fish and Game will, basically say, hey, we're going to put this cow hunt on and we're going to put the pressure on these and we need to get these elk back under management objective. And yeah, we do some supplementing feeding, and that's been going on for a long time. And there's a big argument there's actually some litigation about keeping that going. And I'm selfish as an elk hunter. I want to see those feedlots continue, because if we just all of a sudden, we really have made those elk pretty dependent on that feed for the winter to survive. And we've now let the ranchers graze the winter feed with cattle. So if we're going to, this is pretty unpopular, but if we're going to pull the feedlots out and say, okay, no more feedlots, we're also going to have to pull some of those cattle out and say, all right, your grazing permit that was worth 150 heads now worth 25 head.
There's just not enough feed. And it's been so hot and dry too.
We're still got it. 3 years ago it wasn't, but we're back in a pretty bad drought. Oh yeah.
And it's going to be a pattern for a while. But yeah, you bring up a good point. You can't have your cake and eat it. It's just, we can't expect to have it both ways, right? We got to be smart about it. Whether it be bears, wolves, mountain lions, elk, it doesn't matter. We got to be smart about how we do it.
And if we're smart and take a few now, right? And we can mitigate that big winter die-off, and then we can mitigate having 3 or 4 or 5 years of zero tags because 90% of the population crashed. And that will happen. And we've seen it happen, and that's based on science, not based on emotion.
And it's not pretty. It's not something that you want to see. All these people that really want to go watch these animals, you have a die-off like that, it's not going to be good,
And it's 3, 4, 5 months. We have a beautiful picture hanging in this podcast of a really nice bull elk that ended up getting eaten by a coyote while he was alive. And it's not pretty. It's not an easy way to go. And it's raw and it's real. It's nature. It's wild out there. And we as human beings want to sit here and make Disneyland out of it.
Yeah, unfortunately. So let's talk about another sponsor here. Let's talk about Bow Spider. I know you've been out for the count for a little bit, but you're going to be getting back on the road. So where are you headed next?
We pretty much follow the whole Total Archery Challenge circuit, and it's a really good event, really good people, lots of good vendors and booths. And one thing I love about Total Archery events is it, like the name implies, it's a Total Archery Challenge. So it's going to challenge you mentally, physically. It's going to challenge your equipment. It's going to test, are you truly ready to go out and do this? And if you're struggling on that 3D course with either the hiking or, just anchoring or off angle, off kilter shots, that's the time to start working those kinks out. Not, you can blow an arrow up on foam and it's not a big deal. You blow an arrow up on an elk. Well, if the arrow didn't blow up and was off its mark, that's worse than anything. So, and as hunters, we need to be responsible and be ethical with our harvest. So the goal of Bow Spider was to create something where it was a quick, easy access. You could get your bow when you needed to. And what's really interesting, unlike these Total Archery Challenges where you're hiking a couple miles of ski resort at 8,000 foot plus elevation, which most of us live under sea level. A couple of us are lucky enough to live above. Some of us live at sea level, right? Or 1,000 feet. Some of us live at 5,000 feet. So we're acclimated to, but when you come from some of those lower eastern states for sure, and you're going to come out west elk hunting, you better have been doing some cardio because it's no joke. But what I wanted to say was Bow Spiders really can help reduce that arm fatigue of having to pack that bow all day. So when you do get the opportunity to make a harvest shot, you're fresh, you're accurate.
Yep. So go to bowspider.com. You still have time to get in before it gets too crazy here right before bow season. Don't try to buy one right in September. I would highly recommend you get it done now.
I wouldn't even buy one the last week of August and say, hey, I got to hunt mid-September.
Yeah. don't
heard that
stress
game.
David out, okay? Like he's gonna try to do what he can for you, but don't do that to him and his family. You know, try to get it ahead of time. Don't try to get it a day before you leave for your hunt. But it is a game changer.
Oh yeah. Speaking of hunts, we launched a feature-length film on YouTube, and when this comes out, you'll have a couple more days to get on and enter and to win on the just search YouTube bow spider sheep, and you'll find the film, and there's a link in the description of how to get to the giveaway. And we're giving $10,000 worth of gear away. So it's from Sheep Feet, from Maven, from High Mountain Seasoning, from Bow Spider, Outdoor Edge, Expedition, and Kufaru, and Blue Creek Outdoors with Joe Bartlett. So you can also go to bowspider.com and find that as well. Yep.
Get on there, enter. It costs you nothing to enter. Might as well. There's going to be 3 lucky winners, and they're all going to get some really good stuff.
They are.
So, and then one other sponsor, because this isn't really a fishing podcast, but I'm going to throw them in here, and we're going to talk about it, is PK Lures. I really wish I could be out doing more fishing, but with my wing that's not quite all the way functional, I haven't done as much as I should have, but I have gone out a couple of times. I will tell you, this time of year, if you're on the jig bite and you want to catch walleyes, that PK Spin-A-Jig is a game changer. If you want to just take it easy and do some trolling, the PK Wobbler, PK Dakota Disc are fantastic for trolling. So go to pklure.com. You can pick those up, support another great company, and get out and catch some fish.
Let some of those big hands go.
Yes.
Keep all the bucks you want.
We're all expendable as males, aren't we?
I feel sometimes, Patrick, and I've said this before, I'm just the oxen that pulls the cart. When the oxen falls over dead on the side of the trail, the family just kind of moves the cart around and goes gets a new one. But
yeah,
it's a joke.
Expendable, you know. But final thoughts on grizzly bears and management. What are your final thoughts on it?
Let's let science dictate over emotion. Be safe out there. As far as, you know, let's not incite any more nasty bears. So definitely food storage. There is a correlation between bears that get habituated on easy food. They, the saying is a fed bear is a dead bear, whether it's a black one or a brown one. And that's pretty easy to be responsible, whether you're camping, hiking, or just, Maine, Michigan, in some of those states that have a pretty bad black bear problem. You know, just keeping your Fido's food locked up and your, fish carcasses or whatever. It's definitely, and we've all seen the video of the black bears climbing out of a dumpster, and somebody backs up and throws a ladder in and lets the bears climb out. And that's just not where bears are meant to be. So let's not invite them into our, and again, if you're backpack camping, it doesn't take that long to take 100 feet of paracord and everybody put your food in a sack and get 2 people to pull the food up. And, the one thing we'll talk about is I stayed in the same campsite that another group of users had been using, and they had been very, done very poor job of food storage. They actually took all their food scraps 50 yards behind camp and were just dumping it, right? And they had stayed in that camp by a lake for a week or 2 prior to us being there. Well, we had a 110-pound black bear that was coming in and disturbing us every night at camp. Well, that bear is going to grow up. Yeah, at 110 pounds, you stand up and yell at him and he'd scurry away. But, that bear is going to grow up, and he's learned that people mean food, and that's going to equate to a fed bear as a dead bear.
And it could be a dead person, too. I guess that would be one of my parting thoughts, is just that if you are going to be in grizzly country, especially black bear country, whatever, any kind of bear country, food storage is very important. Get it away from your camp, get it up in the air high so that they can't get to it. Make sure you keep things out of your tent that are going to make them interested. I've had biologists tell me don't even have toothpaste or any of that stuff. All that stuff goes up in your dry bag, up in the tree. Like, you get that stuff away from your camp.
You carry toothpaste in?
Heck yeah, a little tiny one.
Oh, okay. Man, no wonder your backpack's so heavy.
Yeah, right. But that's a big part. And then also, like you talked about it before, I'm a big believer in going in groups. Make sure that you have the bear spray. If you're going to be up here,
if you're hunting, you're obviously going to be trying to be quiet, but I'm actually not that quiet in the woods anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, when we're traveling, we're actually making some noise. We're talking back and forth. We're laughing. Now I'm elk hunting, so we rip a bugle if we don't get a response, and we're not overly loud, but I mean, we're having normal level conversation so that I don't have to come around the trail and at least startle a bear at 15 feet, right? Some of those dense trails are just, and if you're solo, the old joke in Alaska was, you want to have bells on your walking person or whatever, and and you want to make sure when you're looking at the trail to identify the difference in scat between black bear scat and brown bear scat. And the way you tell is black bear is usually smaller and has quite a bit more seeds in it, less hair, and grizzly bear turds is usually a little bit bigger, has more hair, but you also find little bells in the grizzly bear
yeah,
turds.
Exactly.
We laugh about it.
We laugh, but it's a real concern. I mean, you don't want to startle grizzly bears. That's the worst thing you can do. But also, so again, have that bear spray, especially in this part of the country where David and I are up around DuBois, the GYE. You definitely want to have your bear spray. Make sure you know what you're doing. Here's another one. Don't be aggressive at a grizzly bear. I've seen tourists do this up by Yellowstone. Do not get aggressive with a grizzly bear, because I guarantee you it will not end well for you. And he won't feel bad, or she won't feel bad when she tears your face off. So
I go back to Dan Thompson, babies, food,
space.
They're going to, Ursus Arctos horribus. They have a bad attitude. They are the boss dog. And I've got some cool grizzly bear pictures I took on the Russian River in Alaska. We'll post one in the show notes. They are a cool critter. There's something awe-inspiring when you get to see one, but A, we need to respect them, and B, we need to manage them.
Yep. Well, I think that is a good place to end this episode. So if you guys want more RadCast, or if you want to comment, you can go to radcastoutdoors.com. Of course, you can find us on all the socials, Facebook, Instagram, all those places. So come check us out. But
stay safe out there. Don't get the COVID, and stay away from the grizzly bears.
That's right. We'll be back again for another episode soon on another episode of RadCast Outdoors.